Hi everyone, good morning to Umbrella Saturday. So good morning. Hi Opemipo Dara.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. All right, so I think we can start. Other people will join us. We have a culture of like starting 10 on the dot, so you're welcome. Um, so once again, it's Umbrella Saturday, and today we have Opemipo Dara, who is a scout and an advisor. She's basically going to be speaking on from informal to investable, tapping the untapped market in Africa informal economy. So I'll just start first by allowing you to speak about your journey, your experience within the African startup ecosystem, what has this meant for you, and then we can now proceed into the topic. Is that fine?
Yes, it is.
All right, then you can go ahead.
Great. Thank you. All right then. Is it okay if I share my screen as well?
You want to share your screen? Yes, you have access to
Yeah.
share.
Okay, fantastic. Will do. So that is out of the way. Mm, okay, good. So you can see it in slideshow view. Great.
Yes, we can see.
Alrighty. Let me put on my video as well. Hi.
We
Good
finally
morning.
get to see you.
Yes, you do. Good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you so much to the Umbrella team for having me today. I think this is a very interesting topic. Um, like you said, my journey, myself, that's always a difficult topic to talk about. I wear many hats, but in summary, I've spent the last decade working in different capacities across Africa to help founders grow businesses, grow their startups in sectors like agribusiness, real estate, financial services, health tech, the circular economy, really in both the tech space and the traditional business space per se, as well as also the informal business space as well. Um, in many ways. Let me try and take us on a short journey back. Um, my background is management consulting, business development, entrepreneurship, and now program and project management. So I've pretty much worked, like I said, in different industries, different capacities as a consultant, as an advisor, as a business development associate, as I've worked sales, I've worked pretty much growth type roles and consulting type roles across different industries and across different scales of businesses as well. Big, small, medium, uh, global, um, international businesses, also micro, small, medium business, micro enterprises as well. Um, and I, as an entrepreneur as well, I've run businesses in hospitality, food service, education. Well, I have businesses currently working in this space. I've also had, of course, attempted businesses, right? Previously in logistics, creative economy, agriculture. I know, I mean, stories for days, right? Um,
How
Current,
you really wear many hats.
yeah. Currently, these days, I'm very focused on working closely with founders. So pretty much, I've had a bit of a segue from traditional consulting into tech advisory. I still do a lot of consulting here and there, working on a couple of projects. I mean, you can't really throw away your consulting, and it's always very exciting, really. It's something I really enjoy. But now within tech space, the advisory needs are kind of different. So, and interestingly, it's very hands-on as well. So it's not just your typical consulting engagements. You typically often have to do a bit of it more hands-on sessions with them, create scalable resources that they can actually use in their businesses, post events, and just so many things, really. There's so many elements to supporting startups that is a bit different from your traditional consulting setup. But basically, working through founders through enterprise support organizations and venture capital firms. I currently work at Co-Creation Hub, CC Hub, managing programs across startup support and hub strengthening. So, working with startups directly, providing them with resources, training, mentorship to pretty much take them from stage one to stage two or two to three, right? So either from idea stage to MVP or MVP to revenue generating or revenue generating to scale. And then, also working across hub strengthening, which is pretty much setting up hubs in different locations, mostly nascent ecosystems, setting them up to pretty much replicate what City Hub does in other locations, and just open up the spaces pretty much. Um, I previously worked with Night Ventures Accelerator, which is the time where I met Ayola as head of growth and advisory, where I was pretty much heading the accelerator arm and also the growth portfolio, and working with ventures, again through programs. I'm also a venture scout for a handful of VC firms and family offices, so that's also something very interesting on VC side as well. So I hope that's a short enough rundown of
Interesting rundown. A very interesting rundown.
yeah, but I think it will give a good background to some of the things I also share.
Yeah.
So you see where I'm coming from. I think I've had a unique privilege of sitting both on the founder side, on the VC side, on the program side, and in
Did
enterprise
you
support
say
side.
sitting? You still sit on all three axes. You
Pretty
don't.
much sitting on all those sides, right? And even as an advisor, so it's been really interesting to be able to see different phases of businesses and the insides. I love seeing the insides of people's businesses. I was sharing yesterday, I was cracking a joke that I love board meetings, especially when they get hot. And they're almost at each other's throats. And usually you're just at an advisor, so you're just observing and just taking notes and like, whoa, this is what you people do here. Very good. So I mean that's always an interesting thing. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you on no Opemipo. That's a very good background. I think we'll just jump right into it. And more people will join us along the line. So let's get into the topic from informal to investable. What came
Yeah,
to mind when this came? And I'll allow you go into your slides from there.
yeah. So yeah, when you shared the topic, it was definitely an interesting one. I don't think it's something I've specifically spoken about, right? I don't think it's something someone has coined as a topic before, which I found very interesting. And it's also very important. And I strongly resonate with it because, for example, I work in tech space. All of my businesses as an entrepreneur are not tech related. They're all traditional businesses. So, pretty much again for context, I run a catering company. I run a gifting company. I'm on the board of a school in Montessori nursery primary creche school on the mainland, right? So they're all really traditional businesses, no extra fluff, right? Yes, tech enabled in your processes and operations, but at its very core, its delivery is still very offline, right? Um, so yeah, I think this is one of those topics that really resonates because what is Africa other than informal, right? Well, mostly informal, right? So it really captures the context of things real well. Um, so just to get into it, when you think of innovation, you typically will picture a tech app or design thinking or a lab or something interesting happening somewhere. You often don't think of innovation in the context of your everyday life, human-centered experiences and human-centered, you know, processes, the things you do every day. You go to the market, you enter your car, you drive to work, you come back home, you cook, you talk to people, you visit friends. You don't typically think of innovation in those ways. Um, but the truth is, what's the difference between a tech startup and the woman in market selling her wares? Both are markets, but we typically only design for one. Um, so let's start with a quick framing. Um, we've heard these statistics often. Africa's informal economy accounts for like 80% of employment, right? And a significant portion of GDP. 80%, think of that is 8 in 10 people. Literally, if you walk on the road, you meet 10 people, eight of them would be informally employed. Before you stumble on your bankers and your admin staff and all of that, you would cross many plumbers and drivers and market traders and entrepreneurs. Almost everybody's an entrepreneur in Africa, right? And it's one of those things born out of necessity, out of the context. Some of the more recent statistics we've seen from that space, there was a recent World Bank report that said 84% of employment in Africa is provided by micro enterprises and self-entrepreneurs operating informally. Um, and that's across the continent. Another report says 85%. I think that was the ISS African Features. 85% of employment is informal, so casual, non-wage household production, all of that. That's really captures informal employment. Um, Another one says informal economy accounts for over 40% of GDP in many African countries and, has also been one of the source of large tax revenue losses. I think that was out of the recent report of Money Point and Smedan. So they had this joint report on informal economy. And the African Development Bank as well estimates that Nigeria loses $8.8 billion annually in revenue due to informal sector tax gaps. That's Nigeria alone. And that's obviously the gap that our president is currently trying to plug, right? But yes, there's a huge gap in accounting for what the economy does. Um, Yet most startups, investors, and policymakers typically still design for the formal economy. Previous tax laws, for example, was for the formal economy. They really capture or think about how to get tax from the farmers, from the market people, in an equitable way, right? The equitable is even a different part. Right now, they're still trying to even crack even getting access to them, right? The equitable part is the debatable bits that we often have. And basically that creates a gap between where people actually live, trade, and work, and where capital and innovation are flowing. So the question that we'll be exploring today is how do we bridge that gap and turn that informality into investable opportunities? Think about that for a moment, right? Again, it's sometimes when we were just saying informal economy kind of dissociates from the people in the informal economy. Um, that's the market women, the informal transport, your Okada, your bus drivers, the conductors, gig workers, street vendors, smallholder farmers, even the area boys. That's another very interesting. I don't know how often, sometimes when we're working and we're busy with our lives, I don't know how often we get a chance to still sit with random people in the street and just talk with them, right? The area boys, they're not really, are they area boys? A lot of them are government workers, right? A huge chunk of them are actual government workers who are informally employed because if you go to your government records, you won't see their names there, right? But they pretty much contracted a job out to them to either stand at the junction and collect tariffs for NURTW, for example, or to be at a certain loading dock collecting tariffs. And they often would remit that money to somebody in the LCDA or a traditional ruler somewhere or both, splitting a cut between both of them. That's a job because they literally wake up every morning, wear clothes, carry a reflective jacket, and go back to that spot and stand there every day. And that's where they eat, that's where they feed themselves, that's where they feed their family, that's where they solve their problems from. So try to put again that into context and put that into real tangible people. Like you can literally visualize these people. And that group of people that always interests me. Again, maybe because of being a caterer, a lot of them are my vendors, they're my suppliers, market women, very close to my heart. I mean, every time I go to the market, they're going to end up making me sit down there and talk with them. So I often have long talks with them. Some of them are very gracious to even share a lot of information about their business, how much they're making, and some of these people are doing amazing numbers daily. Like turnover is crazy. You'll be shocked how much some of these people are making daily, millions daily inflow. And this is with barely any education, barely any structure, barely anything, just figuring it out. A lot of structures are very informal. Their own suppliers who are very informal. Their utility bills are informal. Everything is informal about them. A lot of it is off the books. You can't catch them. You can't quantify how much they use in energy per year as a frozen chicken seller. You can't explain it. It's just going right. And those are the backbone on what the economy really rests on. These networks dominate trade, they dominate agriculture, health, energy, even tech adjacent services. So even your micro retailers, your malams, that's again my malam, for example, from my house. He's selling food. He's making indomie and egg. He does bread and egg and tea in the morning. He's selling normal wares. He's parking cars because there's a big church nearby. So he's parking cars. He's doing so many things. All of that is bringing in money. And he has a family back in the north that
But
he's
these
taking care
guys
of.
make a lot of money than us. It seems like they're just making a whole lot.
Some of them do. Some of them do. You'll be shocked.
And in our head, we live in that bubble of we employed them.
Yes, 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 yes. Some of them do be shocked because the money we pay Malam, for example, we pay him a token fee. I always wonder that this money is not plenty now, because it's shared across like the apartments in the building. So we just pay him a small fee. But I mean, all the work that is in outside is more than he makes way more than that daily. He makes way more than his monthly pay daily because you should see the crowd that comes to buy food from him, and he's selling it at maybe like 1,000, 1,005, right? So if 30 people come a day, that's 30K. That's his monthly pay has made it right that day. So at 30K times, 30 days, that's significant money.
Irony of
So
it, you guys are providing me lights, water, and the rest of it. So yeah,
exactly.
zero cost.
Yeah. And accommodation too, which is such a big deal
Big
in
deal
in
in Lagos. Yeah.
in Lagos. Yeah. So I mean, that's really it. And then also think of your artisans, your plumbers, your electricians, your carpenters, all of that. But because they don't look like the structured registered entities we are used to, investors and even founders often skip over them. So yes, the demand is massive, and in my experience, really, or in our experience, just from daily lives, the real customers in Africa live here first, right? Um, so why must conduct build for informality? I'm a big fan of informal business ideas turned formal, or founders with traditional experience turning to tech, right? I love it. I love a good somebody working in a warehouse decided to make a warehousing app. I love a good segue like that. I feel like we don't have enough of that in Africa. We don't see that too often, as you'd expect. Um, we see that a lot in a lot of the more developed markets. So many times you typically find somebody that, a founder that is 50 years old, they have been working in trade, he's working in retail, across different stores, opening stores in different locations. And he just comes up with something to simplify the process of checking up on each store, and is a banger because obviously this person has been knee deep in it for the past maybe 20, 30 years and have serious experience in that space and he knows the pain points really well and is able to solve that problem really well. We don't have that often. And so it's something we also try to do as ecosystem builders, which is why, I mean, oftentimes when we have applications, we're always like, let it come from everywhere. It's not just the tech bros that's supposed to be sending us pitch decks and all of that. We want to see it from everybody, we want to see it from everywhere. So another thing that I really like is, tech that is solving for the grassroots, that hits the sweet spot of, being a very useful tool and actually solving a problem, not just being a social enterprise, clinic off to help the underserved somebody, almost like a charity type work. So those are some of the things that I love to see generally when we're working programs and taking in applications and things like that. Uh, so let me bring this home with three reasons founders must embrace formality. So one, distribution. Informal networks definitely move goods faster than any formal retail chain. I mean, that's where we buy the bulk of our stuff. Like I said, okay, I now have a formal business, right? So I run a catering business. I also have a family business that is a bar, right, on the mainland is in Yaba, and it's pretty much your typical nightlife bar, um, foods, pepper soup, okwabi, all of that, right? Neighborhood, target market is corporate guys after work. So and then it's also near university, so students as well. So that's the target market. So those are two formal businesses, registered, paying tax, all of that. And those businesses buy from these informal markets every day. We're trading with them. Sometimes, in fact, you send dispatch, they'll pick it up. They too also know how to deliver now. So a lot of them too are even embracing technology in different ways. Some of them, in fact, there's one of the markets where is the young girl that's assisting one of the vendors. She's the one that knows how to use Uber. So anytime they want to send something to you, they often will leave their stores and have to go and look for that girl in the market to help them send it via Uber. So I mean, that's an example. And informal networks basically move goods faster, wider than any formal retail chain right now on the continent. People rely on community. So the next one is trust, right? Um, on trust, people rely on community referrals, word of mouth, social proof, right? Not flashy advertising. Even social media wise, a lot of the things we're doing on social media is for us that are using the social media. It's not hitting the grassroots. It's not the people on the streets and remote areas in rural areas aren't seeing those things. Even if they do, they don't see it often, right? They log online once in a while when there's free bumper package on their data, and they just looking, checking. Oh, okay, TikTok very funny, and that's about it, and they've moved on. So trust is really on referrals and social proof and relationships and community structures. Um, Thirdly, a third reason would be affordability, flexible pricing, sachet models, pay as you go. These innovations all come from informality. If you look at some of Africa's biggest success stories in fintech, logistics, agribusiness, many of them scaled by embedding themselves in informal structures first before going formal. Um, so something I will also say at this point is that in Africa, scale often comes bottom up, right? By winning trust in informal networks first, then formalizing. Some of the best um, some of the best solutions to come out of Africa, not just the unicorns, but some of the ones that have been long lasting. Because I think that's another thing we often forget in categorizing the good startups or the businesses that are doing really well. We often just go straight and think of valuation or who are the highest valued businesses. but there are businesses that are not unicorns that have large amounts of users and are covering large amounts of regional areas. So basically, the best businesses that are covering ground often win trust by leveraging those informal networks first, digitalizing undigitalized problems, or partnering with those offline markets and offline bits of our lives, then formalizing. Um, so I'll share some case studies. So from my work as well, we've seen in agribusiness, we've seen farmer cooperatives, for example. Uh, so this I saw this in Togo actually. One of the startups we're working with there pretty much works with farmer cooperatives scale by aggregating informally. Um, before formal contracts arrive. We also see this in some startups in Nigeria as well, in Kenya, where pretty much access to farmer cooperatives or access to farmers. Sometimes maybe the product is one of those startups that deal with giving inputs to farmers on credit or something like that. And how do you access the farmers? Again, these are farmers that are deep into the rural areas, remote areas. There's some areas that you not believe how people are here, and you really won't expect to be in this location. And people are deep in those locations, building their communities, living their lives. But you want to onboard them on a platform that is going to benefit them. How do you get access to them? Through farmer cooperatives, any group that is aggregating them pretty much in one spot. And all these groups are informal, right? So you have to access these groups before formal contracts even arrive. Sometimes you never even actually nail the formal contracts. You might onboard them onto the platform in some sort of way. Sometimes your typical onboarding should be they should download the app and sign in, right? Sometimes you have to figure out another way of onboarding them, either through agents and literally filling them into the form by yourselves, and things like that. So that's something you'd also see. In health tech, we've seen startups serving patients living on less than $1 a day, building community agent networks rather than relying on hospitals, um, just to get again into the deep grassroots, into all the underserved areas, into all the communities that actually need this product. Um, Sometimes you'd even see startups that typically would often focus on, say, middle class, upper middle class at first. And then you then see that there's an opportunity within the grassroots or lower income segment of the market, or you then have to design a product for that market. And how do you get access into that market after working in middle of Lagos so long and your office is in Yaba or your office is in Ikoyi? How do you get access to that other than community agent networks, referral networks, and all based on informal um, businesses? Recently, I was also speaking to one of the startups within my program portfolio that was so they're fintech. What they were basically trying to do is actually, they're not even fintech. So it's embedded finance, but they also are within like the publishing space. So books distribution, pretty much digitalized. And one of the things they were trying to nail is um, how to distribute um, access to this service through informal cooperatives across like schools, where schools, because a lot of the authors that they currently have are lecturers within schools. Another startup that I spoke to again during the week, we're trying to figure out how to leverage kiosks. So your POS agents, pretty much, rather than building their own agent network, really, leverage the POS agent network already as a landing point for them to access certain people. And theirs was healthcare as well. So perhaps to pretty much take healthcare into the deep regions, and making it as affordable as possible, as accessible as possible, payment as flexible as possible, and using POS agents as some sort of connecting point for those people that they're trying to serve. Another example would be in the circular economy, waste for food models emerged from informal recycling. If you remember as far back as when recyclers started and all the other ones that followed. I'm sure there was some before recyclers, but recyclers is the one that always resonates with me very early. Um, because I mean they were really one of the first to really crack that model. And initially it was essentially just people on the streets collecting plastics. They've always been collecting plastics, but they collect plastic to go and sell to Zobo seller, to Kuno seller, to wash and reuse. And this time they have somewhere else that they can just take to. That'll probably pay more than the Kuno seller and give them straight cash for it. No questions asked.
Let me step in there.
Mhm.
Prof. Do you know I just recently discovered that people also buy cartons?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
That's a big market. They buy
Mhm.
them by scaling the cartons. This guy comes around, he picks up your carton of noodles, the ones that you throw into the
Yes.
trash because you think it's not,
Yeah.
and then they
Yeah.
pay them. That's a big market as well. And my
Yeah.
first question that came to my mind is why is this guy collecting trash of cartons? And then
Yeah.
I'm hearing the person who is giving him say, "Oh, guy, you never wear," meaning that you
Mm.
weighed it. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what are they weighing? These
Yeah.
cartons, I have them in my house. I pack them out almost every time to the trash.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure my gate man probably knows that there's money there. So
Oh, he
happy
probably
to weigh
sells it.
it and sell it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So they walk around and try and collect these things. So again, the nature of businesses I work in as well, gifting. So we're often buying things in bulk, lots of cartons. The food business as well, we often have a lot of cartons and things like that. They literally come by and they know us and they target all of us that have those type of businesses that will have cartons, and come by and say, do you have any cartons? Sometimes they also take sacks. So all those sack of rice, sack of anything, your empty plastic, your paint buckets, your oil kegs, all those things. Happy to take them off you. And typically you're taking it to sell. They're not going to go and play with it. So yes, yes. So there's so many little ways that money is moving within the economy. That is always so interesting. So yeah. Here's the key lesson. Informality is not a weakness. It's not a dirty thing. It's not something to not engage with. It's an entry point. It's really an entry point into the larger market. So some examples from the wider ecosystem, you see Wasoko, which is in Nairobi, Kenya. They began by focusing on informal retailers, mom and pop shops, who make up a large share of retail in East Africa. These shops are informal, they have irregular supply chains, they lack working capital, and suffer from inventory shortages. The startup saw that these informal retailers pretty much needed more than an online catalog. They need reliable delivery and access to credit, right? How did they now go from that to being investable? They pivoted into B2B logistics and distribution platform tailored to that informal retail network, built infrastructure, warehouses, delivery fleets, all of the things, and financing solutions as well for these retailers. And then they've been able to raise significant funding, then prove traction, reliability, impact, all of that. So that's really it. Which Regionize, I came across them working on one program with the JETRO, with the Japan External Trade Organization. And, we're pretty much trying to shortlist certain startups doing certain things in different regions, pretty much across Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa. So Regionize works with informal waste collectors as part of their model. These collectors often outside formal supply chains. They collect waste in underserved communities. Again, they're based in South Africa. So the startup integrates them into a formal infrastructure of decentralized recycling hubs. They provide tools, support, incentives, equipment, local hubs to scale their reach. And they become investable. They've secured funding from, I think it was E Squared Investments, through a venture philanthropy model, which blends social impacts with formal business expectations. And by connecting formal, informal collectors, building trust, operational capacity, they are pretty much generating measurable impact and revenue and making their model more investable. Another example would be Scrappies. Scrappies is I think Scrappies is the City Hub, is one of the City Hub portfolio. So sometimes another thing that happens across the ecosystem is you might have worked with a startup somewhere else. You find them in another company, or you find them in another program within your company and things like that. So Scrappies, I think I even saw them again recently at the Gitex event. And what they do is pretty much they start with working with informal waste producers, household, small businesses, and decentralized waste collectors, recycling. I know the recycling sector, as you said, in Nigeria is really informal. So collection, sorting, disposal is usually done by informal actors. And they built a platform, USSD. It has some IoT functionality. I think it also has like mobile web apps, and then to the platform basically facilitates easier participation in recycling and simplifying how waste is collected and paid for. Um, so you see a lot of these examples across the ecosystem, cold hubs as well that installs solar powered cold storage in farm produce markets, distribution centers, aggregation centers, and smallholder farmers and informal market vendors can rent space on a daily basis to preserve perishables. And then from cold hubs, you've seen a lot of other startups do something similar in that space, just the solar powered cooling solution space. Um, there was another one I worked with closely at some point, Edja Ice, which is also doing really interesting things in that space as well. They also do not just solar powered cold storage units, they also do like last mile delivery cold storage solutions as well. And they also give market vendors the opportunity to own these units, and build some sort of credit history and assets basically that they can also leverage to either get loans or something else in the future. And then, Winich Farms, which has pretty much built a supply chain infrastructure for farm produce, including collection points, informal farmers. I think the office is in Ikoyi, helping with access to technology. You might not really define them as your typical startup, the way it's set up. However, they have raised sizable pre-series, I think pre pre-series A, right? Funding for about $3 million or so to scale further, right? And then, there's taking it, I had to dig for a francophone Africa case study, Chari in Morocco. I think they also serve in Cote d'Ivoire as well. They are B2B platform. They, supply inventory to informal corner shops, mom and pop shops in Morocco and Ivory Coast. And it combines inventory supply, fintech credit facilitation to small vendors that can order and restock reliably without formal supply chain overhead. So again, these are just ways a lot of startups are leveraging the informal economy or partnering with it or solving for it. And it's so important and it really is a key one. Also putting omni retailer and money point. I feel like the audience will be more familiar with those examples. That's what they're doing. Just that informal entering into the grassroots, getting to the real meat of the matter, right? And they've been able to scale that up significantly, and are really one of the top businesses on the continent in their field. So those are just some case studies to really put it into perspective for us. On to bridging informality with investability. Um, so here's the challenge. The question would then be, so why are investors not as interested in the informal economy? Um, well, because the barriers are real. There's no reliable data. Uh, Data is often unstructured, fragmented, all of that. There's also a fragmented customer base. They are not in one place. They are also not one demography. They are just everywhere in different corners, unexpected places. There's also perceived risk. And let's not lie, a real risk in a lot of the informal spaces. There's a real risk. There's lack of governance, lack of structure, both governance internally and then governance externally, as in regulation and all of that. So this creates a tension. Even if there's an amazing problem solved, scalable, doing well, lots of businesses doing well, but it's hard to fund. I think another thing I always say is to put yourselves in the shoes of investors. Again, we often think of investors as some sort of rich people that just have money that they're just sharing, right? But what it really is a financial institution. They are essentially like a bank, right? You stay home, they go around 3 to 7 years it takes them to pretty much source for funds from fund of funds and from general partners, and the source of funds pull those funds together and then have to disburse it to businesses that are going to return those money in the space of at least 10 years, right? At most 10 years, at least 1 year. 1 year will be the dream, right? But the window is pretty much 10 years. So this is an institution. They are not playing around. Yes, sometimes they have to wear the hat of also supporting the startups, advising the startups. They have to sometimes do programs and get knee deep into the whole ecosystem. But what they really should be doing and want to be doing is they are just a financial institution. They are a less formal hedge fund, right? Or a less formal pool of funds, really. And that's really who they are at the core. So these businesses are very hard for those type of businesses set up in that way to invest in. So what can founders then do to bridge that gap and that perception gap with investors? So here are some practical steps that I've seen work for some founders. So if you're working in an informal space or you're working with informal, so the market you serve is an informal market, one of the things you can do is, data collection to solve that data gap. Lightweight data collection. If you can crack being the data source for an informal sector that is otherwise off the grid and offline and off map and off data circuits, right? That's such a major thing. They will literally pay money just for that data, apart from even the service you do, right? So lightweight data collection, even simple tools like Google Sheets or WhatsApp records, or USSD based reporting. I'll give you an example. So I have a mentee on one of the places that I'm engaged in, and pretty much what they do is they capture data. In fact, it's a new product that they really worked on. And what they do is they work with market women, and not just market women, like market women within like relatively remote rural areas. And what they do is capture data so they give them like these booklets that is simplified as simple as possible because this particular audience, there's no way you can get them to open any app to type in anything, right? Some of them don't even have smartphone. Some of them can't even read, so they're not literate. They can't read, they can't write. At best, if one of their kids are around, they will get them to do it. But other than that, it's nothing. You cannot get anything from them through an app, right? So basically, for those of them that can write or are a bit more literate, give them a book so that they can fill in some of the numbers that they have daily, and basically they then use agents to go around collect those books, or the agents have to go around, sit with them for 20 30 minutes, ask them questions, fill in the booklet for them, and then take that information and then return the booklet to them and then share that info. So that's an interesting lightweight data collection method that leverages your good old books and agents, um, and pretty much trying to establish the bookkeeping culture within those small businesses. So they go to stores weekly and pretty much collect those written data. Or a health startup using WhatsApp reporting for community health agents. So you have agents also in the field rather than telling your agents to be writing some reports and be sending you something on the Google Workspace, so none of that. Just WhatsApp, good old WhatsApp. What did you see on the field? How did you go today? Answer these questions and then they send it. You guys internally can then do whatever you want to do with that data. So they submit daily logs of number of patients seen, treatments given, follow-ups, and these logs feed into you. They can now be fed into your Google Sheet, which manages reviews weekly and helps quickly see usage of trends or usage trends, detect drop-offs, decide where to allocate resources and things like that. So another one that works is cash flow validation. So showing clear evidence of money moving, however small. So for example, maybe an agribusiness that sells through local markets, keeping simplified ledgers of cash in, cash out. Again, much like the example I gave earlier, anything that can prove that these people are making money regularly is valid information. And also you can detect trends, cost of inputs, how inflation affects these businesses, and so much more. Another one would be early governance structures. So rather than having necessarily your typical board of directors or your proper advisory board, they could have community boards. They can have mentors or just basic reporting systems. Where they can, have maybe community elders come together or community leaders and adults within that space come together, review decisions, monitor project progress, ensure contracts and supply agreements are honored, using basic agreements and MOUs with their vendors and things like that. And finally, partnerships. So informal businesses can always leverage on hubs, DFIs, corporates who can serve as validators and give credibility. Again, luckily, these days within this space, there's so many um, some of these ESO organizations, hubs, DFIs, corporates that are now realizing the value within the informal ecosystem and are making a lot of solutions towards it. One that comes to mind is LSCTF, Lagos Innovates. They're doing so much work within that informal economy. They're doing lots of training. Sometimes they have trainings on plumbing, electrical, something, something, carpentry. Sometimes they say welding. They are doing a welding workshop. Everybody come and learn. Sometimes they're giving out loans. Sometimes they are doing outreaches. There's so many work to do within this space, and we see a lot of even investors setting up things within those spaces. Sometimes they start as maybe some sort of CSR and outreach type thing, but oftentimes they end up formalizing them and seeing that that's also a very valid pipeline of having investable businesses. And none of these require like millions of dollars. But they can shift how investors see you. So imputing some of these practical solutions can really change the way your business is pictured and the way it is positioned. Um, the question is not whether informal markets are investable, it's how founders package them to become legible capital to capital, right? Or how you position it in front of investors to seem like an investable business. So you really have to have those structures in. Um,
Let me
so
jump in. Let me jump in and ask a question.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I would love you to touch on. Most times when it comes to the informal markets, right, the bulk of the conversation is on discipline. No clear structure so as to business funds versus personal funds or business funds and family funds. How
yeah,
how how do you advise an informal market or a founder, an informal founder now? Let me put it in that place. Uh,
yeah,
to get that sorted out.
yeah. So I think before advising them to get it sorted out, they have to want to sort it out, right? There has to be an incentive for them to do it. So sometimes you do see informal business owners reach out by themselves and say, "Oh, I want to formalize, right? I want to become more, I want to raise capital. I just want to become more serious, more, gang, rather than just maybe being in a kiosk on the side of the road or working from your house, right? Just talking from your house, delivering from your house. You want to set up a shop or something and you really want to formalize. So sometimes the need to formalize comes from the vendors themselves, and then in that case it's definitely easy when they reach out to advise them what to do. And um It's really simple. Have two separate accounts. That's the first step. Two separate accounts. Use your business accounts each time you're collecting money. When you are buying something for the business, buy from the business accounts. You know, keep your money separate. Pay yourself a salary from the business, right? So all those basic rules are the things we typically would tell an informal founder to do. Again, they need to be willing to do it. You also can then share the benefits of doing that with them, because really what happens is that you then start to see very clearly how your business is growing, how well it's doing. You can really track your business and how it's doing. I also find it a lot of fun, because like I always like saying, oh, my business is owing me money, or I'm owing the business money, or I have money, my business doesn't have money, or my business doesn't have money, I have money. Like it's very clear and very separate. And business can has a lot of roller coasters, lots of ebbs and flows. And honestly, as a founder, you often get trapped in those ebbs and flows. When your business is down, you think you're so broke and down. But sometimes you're okay separate from the business. You can only see that when those things are separated, right? And it plays a significant role on the mindset of the founder. So those are usually the things from my own personal experience that I share with founders, that it's so good to separate these things for these reasons. But again, that need has to come from them. Then once in a while, there's an external reason why they want to do that, maybe to comply with some sort of government directive or tax directive or something. Those are pretty much the reasons when you then have an aim to tell founders to do that. But other than that, it really has to come from the founder has to want to formalize to be able to do
I
those
think
things.
that there's a lot of educational gap in the informal ecosystem or marketplace, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these guys are, like you said, not so educated.
Mm,
Nobody's educating them around what to do and not what to do.
mm,
And then the bulk of the challenge, I think personally, is the education. It's informal, but can education also be informal to them as well? In such a way that it gets to them at the um maybe most easy way for them to understand.
mm, mm. So yes, absolutely. However, unfortunately, within the context we stay in, education traditionally should be a government role, uh, and for so many reasons, is one of those thankless jobs, even economically. It's not something you should be starting as a business to make money. Technically, let's really think about all the things that go into education, right? It's out of necessity that we have a thriving private school economy in Africa. Other than that, everywhere else, private schools are few and far between. They're just a few of them. And a lot of them are often set up as research organizations or community organizations, not necessarily as a for-profit one man decide that I want to open school to make money business, right? So it has come out of necessity. Uh, and so unfortunately, that angle of relying on, say, government to cover those educational gaps is not the most viable part to think of it. So the onus then lies on founders that want to engage with these businesses. So if you set up a startup that wants to engage them on bookkeeping, right? So maybe it's an accounting app or something. You've created a product for the informal economy, and you want to basically teach them why they need to do bookkeeping. Because left to them, why am I doing bookkeeping? I'm paying all my bills. I'm okay. You're giving me an extra layer of work to do, right? So you literally have to often go to the market, sit them down. That agent, if you're using like an agent model, you have to train your agent in what to say, how to explain it to them, how to break it down, and to also tell them the benefits. Again, incentive is very big for this specific demographic. You can't just come and tell them that something they should do something because it's good. It's, good for who, right? There has to be an incentive. So if you can incentivize your service that you are also going to render to
Question
them.
is how sustainable is that for a startup who is going into such an ecosystem, giving out
Yeah,
incentive? Is that a
yeah,
sustainable growth pattern?
yeah. So incentives don't have to be money. It doesn't have to be you giving out money. You just have to show them why this is good for them. So it's either you created a model where they can also make money off of this. So there's a new revenue stream you're basically opening up to them. That's always a good incentive. Now you're talking, you are now you're speaking their language. Right? There's a way you're going to make money. Maybe you have some sort of other partners that are willing to pay for this service and are willing to access these informal businesses to bring in either new revenue or partnerships or scale up their businesses or whatever. Even if it's as little as you're going to upgrade their store, which is what something that Coca-Cola and all of them do. We'll give you signage, we'll give you chair, we'll give you Kyoda every month. Even that is incentive enough, right? So sometimes it's either you're opening up them up to new partnerships, new opportunities, new scale, new locations, new revenue streams, or you're going to render a service for them that they need for free. Or another tactic is often rendering the service for them for a while for free. So freemium model pretty much. So giving them some sort of free access to whatever solution you have, and them truly seeing it by themselves that, oh, this is actually good and very helpful, solves a lot of my problems. And maybe, for example, you're able to even help them start seeing how money is missing from maybe their shop girl is stealing money from them. They're like, very good, you solved the problem. Right? So those are some incentives that you really have to, again, it's our value proposition. You have to give value to get value. You can't just solve a problem for solving sake, really. Yeah.
I know we're talking about the potential of that market, but nobody really talks about the losses that go in that market. Like
Yeah.
there's a whole lot of loss from the
Oh
government
yeah.
down to even the business owners, even down
Yeah.
to the tax, because
Mm-hmm.
these guys most times aren't even taxed,
Yeah.
if or correctly, if I would say that they pay to local government. In fact, I feel like they are overtaxed. They pay to local government, they pay to
Mm-hmm.
the shop, uh,
Mm-hmm.
to the state government, they pay the federal one as well. They are just like there's tax, and they keep paying because they just have to pay. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, within that pipeline, right? Is there a solution for the informal markets? Because again, I feel like everybody's just lynching on this informal. The government benefits from them, the private sector
Mm-hmm.
benefits from them, everyone
Mm-hmm.
benefits from them, but nobody pays attention to them.
Yeah. So yeah, uh again, it depends on who wants to bridge the gap. So those are often the challenges we have. Who wants to bridge the gap and why? Like you said, they do pay a lot of taxes, but the taxes are not getting to the final destination a tax. So for example, a lot of governments doesn't they don't tax them directly, or they use their parastatals. Parastatals will come, they will say television tax, signage, what's their name? Last LASA, the ones of the advertising, Lagos State Advertising Agency or something like that. Those ones will come, you say their signage is Kineko, bring money, and that one will come. Waste, you don't manage your waste well, this is your fee, all of that. So sometimes what they even do is to avoid paying those tax, gas, sorry, something, okay, take free chicken, take free beer. So that they will leave them alone, and those ones will say, okay, okay, I'll come back next month. Okay, they'll come back next month again. It means that they'll take chicken again next month. But those are some of the things that you see within that space. And when they do collect tax from these people, they often take a cut for themselves. They'll give their oga, they'll give somebody else again, their oga who can give somebody again before the final destination gets to the government. And sometimes it never even gets to the government. Some of the times the money goes to maintaining that parastatal, their office or whatever costs that they incur. So yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of how even the system of collecting tax from them is very informal. Um, so somebody has to want to plug it.
So,
Um,
so Opemipo, right? I
yeah.
think some of the reasons why the books remains so disorganized for an informal market.
Are there?
Aren't these the reasons why the books remains so informal? Like, how do I write
Yeah.
in my books to say I gave uh I would do who is the the touts that comes to collect from the local government. How do I write that? Or do I write bribe to or payment? You know, those are
You write it to you write it payments to outdo. That is, you write it. I mean, that's why it's informal. That is in the name, is informal. So everything about it is informal. So even in the books, you see strange payments. But that's the flow of money. That's where money is going to. And that's the flow of the economy. The economy itself is informal. So that's why we have to design for these things rather than trying to exclude them, right? Rather than telling a company that no, you can't write payment to outdo. What am I going to write? I have to write it. Let them write it. It's you that, as the startup, whatever you want to do with that information, that's fine by you. But we have to design for these things to accommodate these eccentricities and this peculiar context that we have. Um, yeah, and basically in terms of losses for the businesses themselves, again, that's where education comes in. That's where the solutions comes in. Those type of problems leave opportunities open, and those are opportunities that businesses can also come in and solve and formalize. So yeah.
Let me put you on the spot. You run a food business, right?
Yeah.
There's that money you pay when you're in the market. There's that money you pay the guy who helps you carry your stuff into the car. That
Yeah.
you are not allocating or you're not calculating to the money that you give out. So how do
I'm
you
not
do your books?
That's loading cost now. Loaded, you hired a loader. It's loading now. I'll give you another example. The money so when you buy in bulk from the market and you're driving out of the market, so you had some sort of cab come in, or even if it's your own personal bus comes in to pick up the load. As you're leaving the market, you have to pay OERU. You have to pay money for load. You Anywhere you want to put it, you can put it in loading cost, you can put it in transportation cost. But it has to go somewhere, right? You paid for it. It's a fee they ask you to pay. It doesn't matter where the fee lands, but you paid for it, so you definitely put it in your books or something. Yeah.
And I'm just going to read the comments in the section.
Yeah.
Henry says there needs to be an umbrella body to represent them at levels beyond the market union. What's your thoughts?
Mm. There needs to be an umbrella body to represent them at levels beyond the market union. Well, who are we representing them to? And what are we talking about? Right. Again, we have to design for the solutions they actually need. Sometimes we get obsessed with designing structures just for designing structure's sake, just because the structure is like that in other markets. So we need to do like that. In terms of representation, I'm thinking that this question is coming in terms of uh how do they get representation on the government levels, right? How do they get into those rooms to be able to ha sorry, hold on. Yeah. So how do you get into those rooms um to be able to advocate for them pretty much and for them to have access into those rooms and tell their story and have policymakers solve for them and all of that. The truth is that even you, the formal economy, are you in those rooms? Who's representing you in the in the room? Right. So none of us have been represented there. Let's not lie about that. So that's a different topic entirely. But what we can do, I also think as like founders and as individuals, what we need to focus more on things that are within our power, right? Rather than things that we can't solve. Let's even try and again solve our own problems as businesses, as informal businesses, structure as much as we can. And then even our associations, let's then try and structure as much as we can within those associations. So as an association, if you guys can come together, so there's so many associations I know that what they do is that they come together and order in bulk from China, right? They come together and do so many things. There's so many things they do formally quite well for themselves. Once you're doing that one well by yourself, don't worry. On your own, whoever is looking for the opportunity to have access to those kind of vendors or people that are aggregated into those groups by themselves, they will come. The day government wants to talk to you too, The day government wakes up and say, they're making plenty money there, government will come by themselves. Then you too, you now table your own matter to them. Okay, very good. Now that you're here, this is what we also need from you guys. So those are where the opportunities lie. So really, it's really about focusing and digging down and doing what we can in our own spaces to build these things out versus trying to now go and look for how to set up another layer on top of what we already have that might not even get to where you hope it gets to, right? So they already have a lot of informal associations and all of that, and those formalizing the talk that we're having about formalizing those things also applies. So it's not just about formalizing their businesses, but formalizing those associations as well. And those market associations are valid enough to represent them in any high levels that they need to be represented, really.
All right. I think I'll just go to two questions and then I'll open it up again for questions. Let's go to the investor's perspective. What are the signals or what signals should investors look out for when assessing opportunities in the informal economy?
Okay. What signals should investors look out for when assessing opportunities in the informal economy? So that also brings a different conversation up. A lot of investors are not tailored to looking for those, so even looking for informal companies in the first place. A lot of investors don't fund those type of businesses because the basic rules are you have to have a pitch deck, you have to have traction, you have to have, how do you catch traction of what is not being tracked, right? So some of the informal businesses literally don't fit into those criteria boxes. And typically that's why a lot of informal businesses they need to formalize to be able to have access to capital. I think the real thing that needs to happen is that there needs to be more informal sources of capital. There needs to be more patient capital out there. There needs to be more capital that is suited for this market out there. Again, we're seeing some of them come up. BOI is doing some things, Africa Development Bank, Development Bank of Nigeria, LSCTF, all the state employment trust funds and all of that. So we see some of that come up again from the government side, from the DFI side. But we don't see a lot of private investors go that route because for government, they can give the money. It's taxpayer money. They will give it after that administration. The story has ended, But for private investors, how are you going to get your money back from investing in informal businesses? So that's one thing. But in the case where, say, it's an investor that is interested in informal businesses on the cusp of formalizing, some of the things they can look out for is willingness to grow, willingness to scale. Of course, again, the same things we typically look out for: quality of founder, quality of team, whoever is under them. But really, informal businesses, a lot of them are like single person enterprises or small family enterprises. So it really is more focused on the founder. How willing is the founder able to adapt to new situations and adapt to different things that they need to do to get the business to the next level. So founder, team, of course, traction is still going to be one of it. You need to know that this business is sustainable. How long has it lasted so far? How long is it willing to last? Let's hope that it's not a founder that wants to jackpot, that is now reaching out to you for funding to fund the jackpot, and things like that. So basically a lot of the same things you look out for in those businesses. You just need to be able to willing to tailor some of it to informal businesses. So for example, rather than expecting an audited financial statement, you're going to be willing to they have to be willing to take unaudited financial statements and probably provide some sort of support to either audit or support with auditing, right? So either having a partner that works with you to do that or some sort of arrangement that helps do that. So you have to be willing to take them at earlier stages and at less polished stages and then feed them within your pipeline and provide them with the support they need to formalize. So that's really the mindset shift that needs to happen in that space.
Okay, so the second question is what sectors within the African informal economy holds the most promising high impact investments? Are you able to take us on that?
Yeah, what sectors? Well, We already see it actually. The same sectors that are big within the economy already. So one, agriculture. 80% of Africa is agrarian. So there's still a lot of value in agriculture. Few decades back, we were also one of the powerhouses. We still are in so many, depending on the crop you look, you zoom in on, and depending on the supply chain you zoom in on. But we're one of the biggest producers of agricultural produce across the world, obviously, Africa as a whole. So yeah, agriculture for sure. Trade will be another one. Trade. A lot of our trade is informal. Again, markets. You are calling it markets, but I don't know if you've been to. I mean, I'm sure you have. Idumota, Okearin, Lagos Island, all of that. Even like equipment financing and big movements is happening there, right? Bulk shipping, so many things are happening there, and it's all market. We'll call it markets together. Everything is market. You that you want to go and buy only two pieces of something, you go to the same place that somebody's going to go and buy 1,000 pieces of it, right? So pretty much trade, yes. Another one will be power, energy, which is why there's a lot of clean energy attempts, and that's why there's a lot of attention on clean energy as well, because clean energy is also one of the frontiers of informal people getting into energy, because energy is typically a big conglomerate game, right? But clean tech is one of the first times within a long era where you are democratizing access to energy, and not just access to energy, but even access to the business people that want to build energy businesses. So yeah, energy is definitely one of it. And again, you don't have to actually be the creator of the energy and the supplier of energy. There's so many things to do within the energy supply chain, from monitoring towers to home fort. I don't know if you heard of what home fort does. Home fort pretty much delivers LNG to homes and businesses, right? So they have IoT devices on the gases. When it's getting low, they know, they come, they refuel themselves. They have a whole depot, a whole warehousing supply chain setup, right? So that's something interesting, and that's energy space, right? So definitely those three sectors stand out to me: agriculture, trade, energy. Yeah.
All right. Somebody has a question for you. It says, what about the spare parts industry?
A good one too. So that's another good example of an informal industry that is doing big things, right? It's a huge industry. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't know the numbers of it offhand, but yeah, again, you just need to take it through Idumota and see the wonders that is happening there. Something that I recently saw was how do a flat packing cars. I don't know if anybody has seen this too. I think it was my husband that was sharing that with me recently, uh, where they were flat packing buses pretty much into containers. So they're not coming as fully stand-up cars. They're coming as flat packed cars, and then they refurbish it, and then you have a whole car, and they just put in whatever extra parts they need. Crazy stuff is happening at the back of one shipping container somewhere in Dumota, and they're churning out cars. Car assembly, informal car assembly, pretty much. So I mean, these markets are going on, and there's so much potential there too. But again, some of the founders in those businesses as well also don't want to be discovered, because they also feel like the more government has access to them, the more government is going to build them. Especially those of them that are doing real serious numbers. I mean, some of them are doing millions a day. So no, I do not want to formalize it. But again, that's where incentive has to come in. There has to be a reason for them that makes it worth it for them to formalize. You can't just formalize because formalizing is good and you say we should do it. No. Right. So there has to be an incentive for them, and that has to come from top down. It has to be government, it has to be society, it has to be all of us. There's no way I as a person can just come and try and make them formalize. Again, unless I've come up with a solution that actually works for them and solves their problem and helps them formalize for their own benefit, not necessarily formalize to hand them over to government, right? So that's something else within that space that is very interesting.
So I know I want to put somebody on the spot. Adaku, she does a lot of stuff with Super Capital, and they do a lot of stuff with the informal market. I just want her to share some of our this thing, and if possible, get you on some questions. Adaku, are you able to mute your mic and maybe share your experience with the informal market? Because they pivoted from agri, according to her, into this. Yeah.
That's
Adaku, are you
fantastic.
there? While she's trying to wear a wig and stuff, what mistakes should founders avoid when trying to attract investments from the informal market? Let's assume that you formalized it already. What are those mistakes that we should take?
Take that again. What mistakes should
Founders avoid when trying to attract investment for the informal economy? You formalized it, but you're trying to attract investment for it.
Fantastic. That's a good question. One, I would say don't rush into it. Again, we see this even with formal founders. Everybody wants to raise money. Why are you raising money? I recently was a judge at one of, I think it was JCI's pitch events. And the question I asked, there were like 10 startups that pitched. Each of them, why are you raising money? Because there were some of them that were doing significant traction and they're trying to raise 100K, 50K, 500K. And literally, the money they are making, if they make it 2 more years, they have the 100K already. So why are you disturbing? Why are you disturbing all of us? So a lot of times I think sometimes founders just think raising is the next thing to do when you have some significant traction. Why do you want to raise? What do you want to use that for? People also think raising is something glamorous and interesting and fun to do. It's serious business. I don't know how many people have seen a VC contract or a safe contract or a convertible debt contract. Uh, the clauses and terms are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. If you don't have to raise, don't raise, please. And that's coming from somebody within the VC space, right? Don't raise if you don't have to raise. Go and enjoy yourself. The cheapest form of what?
I just someone said they want the hype.
Yeah, so a lot of them like the hype. You just see the raises, you just see them on the news. So and so raised $3 million, and the amounts too are very exciting. $3 million, $1 million, blah blah blah. Sometimes people also forget that they are not giving you the cash all at once. They are going to give you in tranches. You're going to hit milestones. They are going to track that money to the last cover. You know. So basically the cheapest form of cash flow for a business is your revenue, is your customers. Your customers give you money, they are not tracking the money after that. They tell you bye bye, they collect their goods, they've gone. Right. So best type of fundraising you can do is definitely you just grow your business and facing your work, which is again that's what a lot of people do in the informal economy already, which they're just living their lives every day, they're making their money and they're going. And they're not trying to raise anything from anybody, blah 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 blah. It's only once in a while they're trying to access credit or something, but for the most part, that's that. So focus on non-dilutive, and if you have to raise, focus first on non-dilutive capital grants, angels, friends and family, all of that before you even start talking about VCs and other formal investors. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I think founders need to know, or some of the mistakes they often make. Another one would be trying to change your business to fit what you think investors want. Uh, and sometimes this happens even before investors are giving you like feedback and telling you, oh, I think you should focus in this direction or something. Sometimes businesses just, oh, I want to raise, so I think this is what investors like. So let me now start building a solution in this space, blah, blah, blah. All of your innovations should be customer led. You should be feeling the pulse of the market and going by the pulse of the market. Your the person that you're trying to please shouldn't be the investors, not just investors, imaginary investors, not investor that is already on your cap table. The one that is you're imagining, that's always a mistake that is headed in the wrong direction. Innovations should typically come from data-driven insights from the market, from your customers, from even when your investors do share um, things that you should do or change, it has to be data-driven. They have to show you the data that proves that this makes sense. Um, so yeah, I think those are two mistakes that definitely stand out to me that I can share right now.
All right. Let me ask you one very interesting question that has been picking my head. How do you sometimes okay trying to even just get funds? An investor probably doesn't even understand the informal African markets. Let me put it that way, right? Um, how do you paint that picture? Now I'm formalized. I've tried to make this informal. I've packaged it to a legit business and a capital-driven business now, right? But how do I paint the story of the informal market in the mind of an investor who has never been to Africa for him to be able to see the size of the problem, the time, the sum, the sum? He doesn't understand the problem in that regards, but that's what he sees. He sees my addressable market. He sees the sizable obtainable market. He sees the addressable market. He's after all that, but the data are not there, right? So, but I know that the potential in that market is a lot. How do I paint this picture to the mind of the investor? Do I take cameras to the market to show him the potential? A day in the life of a founder, in
Yeah, yeah. So that question is an interesting one. A couple of things already come to mind. I think something that we need to first know about that is that it's a journey. It's not one day you're going to convince the whole world to invest in Africa. And that's why we do a lot of storytelling about Africa, a lot of Afrocentric things in the tech ecosystem in recent times, and even like in just the business ecosystem, even just like content creation space as well. There's been a lot of storytelling about Africa. So it's a journey. And you can also see light bulbs come up for a lot of people in different countries. They're like, oh, they do this in Africa. The most recent one that I found fascinating was the whole fashion thing when I think it was the Met Gala that happened first. And everybody was, what's looking at the Met Gala, and everybody was still in Met Gala mode. And then right after AMVCA's happened, and for the first time, a lot of people around the world were like, "What? See the fashion coming out of Nigeria? Wait, what was happening?" It was mind blowing because the Met Gala, I think this year sentiments were around, oh, it wasn't that good. It was just for like normal stuff and just overdoing. But the looks that came out of AMVCA this year were just wow. They just like, they are making these things in Africa, and so it was mind blowing. So again, just storytelling helps. But as a founder, trying to reach out to a specific investor, you have to find the data. You have to find the data that's going to make sense for them. But again, the power of storytelling is also very strong. So yes, if you need to carry carry cameras to the market, you just might have to, because you might have to paint a picture of what is really happening within your business. So say you have a business that's doing really good in the informal economy, customer testimonials, which is essentially carrying cameras to the market, right? So it might be camera, it might be, just taking written testimonials, it might be videos, short videos, or it might be, one of these days have them come over to Nigeria, or if they're available in Nigeria, or they have a representative in Nigeria, take them on a tour to meet customers, or have customers come in to whatever meeting that you're doing to have them share their stories and things like that. So that's something that we've had to do before with certain investors. And then certain investors too, when they get to a certain level in due diligence, they often would ask to meet some of your customers too as well, or will reach out to your customers themselves and do some due diligence in that regard. So yeah, storytelling is one. Gathering that data, like I said, plugging that gap of, yes, the data doesn't exist, but you have access to data that everybody else doesn't have access to. So collecting those data, lightweight solutions and practical solutions of collecting data as simply and as easy as possible, and showcasing those data. That's exactly why I came up with those few practical solutions you could literally can do to position yourself and convince an investor that yes, there's money in this place, right? You have to be able to track, cash flow and validation and validate cash flow. You have to be able to put in structures in place. So yes, you don't have a formal board or whatever, but there's a community board that has somebody that's been doing something in that community that's similar for the past 20 years, that has elders of the market on board, that has this, that has that, that has this. That's significant. That's something, right? So those things are pretty much the answer to that question of things you can do to show an investor the potential within an informal market. Again, it's a journey. So I have two examples in mind. I've had an experience where it was an insurtech, and we're trying to convince them to invest in this insurtech, pretty much in the African space and insurance and all of that. Again, it was just a matter of, like I said, painting the picture, gathering the data that does exist, and then sharing stories from their experience so far building. You know, insurance, so many people, I mean, you know how insurance is. People still avoid it. People still think it's a negative thing. You literally go and sell insurance and they'll tell you that you're wishing me bad and things like that. But again, that uninsured crowd leaves a lot of potential. So it was basically just telling that story and trying to convince them about that story, and show them those numbers. And they invested in that startup. They were one of the investors. Another company was the lead investor, but they invested in that startup eventually. Another story I have is it's a healthcare startup. And again, same story, trying to convince a certain investor. Oh, I have a better story that happened more recently. So this is a friend. So they run a ICT firm, pretty much building solutions for governments, banks, uh, DFIs, whoever that needs like either software solutions or IoT type solutions, some hardware embedded solutions as well. And they pretty much build out these solutions for companies. So they had a lot of issues with, again, remember the target audience is government, DFIs, all of them. They don't always pay on time. Oftentimes wait times can extend a year. You can finish a project and literally be chasing them around for a year before you see money. Huge amounts of money. So inflows are really crazy, but sometimes receivable timeline is all out of whack. So basically they needed more working capital. At this point, they were starting to, they were having a bit of crunch on even like salaries and things like that. So speaking to these investors, speaking to them for months, and they were an investor that they had not invested in Africa before. This was their first time. And they were so interested in this business. Again, the cash flow is crazy. Like they're actually making money if you can just figure their problems out. This is really a cash cow. And they tried and tried and tried. And unfortunately, that investor hired a consultant within the African market who around that time did a study on Nigeria. That was when dollar was going crazy, and pretty much did a study that said Nigeria was too volatile for them to invest. And that's how they have been talking to this investor more than 8 months. And this was like the last line they had, because they are talking to different investors. Everybody else has said no, blah, blah, blah. They had gotten a credit line that's kept them on for a while. This was their last, and I think they were supposed to invest about $23 million. So it was, oh Lord. I literally went to hold them and comfort them because it was a lot. But pretty much that sealed the deal for them, and they were like, oh my god, we're sorry, we can't invest in Nigeria altogether, and we're pulling out of this deal. They had done due diligence, they talked, they had sent term sheets, and they had gotten almost the end of the conversation. And so that's how that happened. So again, two different stories, two different outcomes. But that's the game. The game is the game. I never stops. It's a continuous process of trying to tell that story of how valuable the informal economy is. Yeah.
So takes me to my final question, and then I would
Yeah.
ask their questions in the house. But I think Henry's chats with me in the chat comment session. Just
Mm-hmm.
that is don't we need more of our local investors investing in this informal structured, so
Mm-hmm.
formal structured
Mm-hmm.
informal markets. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what language we want to use to be able to show that there's
Mm-hmm.
that bridge, but we need our
Yeah.
local investors to play more roles for the
Yeah.
foreign guys to be able to invest in it. But like Henry has said, a lot of them want to invest in fintech, in AI,
Mm-hmm.
in all that, foreign stuff. Whereas the informal market solves a lot of problems for us generally in Africa. Right? What's the role of, or how do we get these local investors to play more roles, in the informal markets?
Fantastic. How do you get? I don't. Again, some of these questions I don't like. I don't like when they are framed. How do you get? You can't get anybody to do anything, or that unless they want to do it. You have to show them the value. You have to show them the value of what they are doing to input in it. So what will be? There are already local investors that invest in these spaces, right? But those are informal investors. So you also wouldn't hear about them. So there are already investors in these spaces, right? So think of your boy, okay, so think of the apprenticeship system that happens in the East, for example, where you serve under somebody for a few years and then your oga then opens a shop for you. That's some sort of investment. That's a local investor already, right? And that happens already informally. As a whole culture does it, right? Informally. One that comes to mind is the people that sold me this cotton behind me. So the guy has, I mean, we just stumbled on them in the market one day and it was one shop and they're like, oh, let's take it to the bigger store. We got to the bigger store, it was huge. It was pretty much a huge chunk of one of the floors in one of the markets in Lagos. I'm like, it was huge. So we met, so we were trying to make decisions, couldn't put our finger on it. And then we ended up meeting the owner of the business. And somehow we just like got talking with him and he was talking about his journey. He started as a boy apprenticing under somebody else, um, and started this store maybe like 25, 30 years ago, and then the other guys under him were there too. And he said this is just one of his stores. In this market he has like 5 other ones of this size. He has another one that is bigger in Lagos Island. He brings in his stuff by himself from Turkey. Sometimes he designs himself, sends his designs to Turkey and he create it and he make it. He also gets some from China. I mean, that's an investor. And he was talking about how he helped some of his boys. Like, so some of them, apart from just giving them money to set up their own business, there are some of them where he essentially still gets a cut from them because he's a huge because he brings in his stuff himself. So they essentially buy from him. So he would extend credit lines to them, all of that because they are his boys, but pretty much he's their supplier. That's another investor. So there's so many of them that already exist, right? But they too are informal investors and you often would overlook them. Now, so getting the formal investors on board, again, some of them is up to them. Some of them would often start a business in that space. They will fund one of their nieces or nephews, family investment, angel investment, all of that. Again, it's up to the founder to be able to tell that story and convince that investor to come on board. The corporate investors is a harder sell, of course, because they have structure and they have the structure for a reason. Because how do you explain to a fund you are raising from MasterCard? How do you explain to MasterCard that you invested in who is selling cotton that cannot track the person what the person is doing per month? Can't explain it. So sometimes, unfortunately, formal investors are out. And again, that's why it's just about designing for what we have. Having informal investors invest in informal economy, or having certain formal investors have a portfolio of traditional businesses that they invest in. And again, we do also see some of that coming out again from DFIs, development banks, government parastatals, non-profits, all of them. There are a lot of them doing a lot of work within those spaces. We often don't think of them as investors because they probably won't collect money back. But yeah, this is also valid. Again, this slide also shows something we talked about, just plugging into the ecosystem. There's so many partnerships that exist, corporate investors, governments, hubs, accelerators, all of them can be gateways to unlocking scale and access to investors. And pretty much investors and founders need ecosystem translators to navigate this this space, and that's where ecosystem builders come in. We need bridges, not barriers, and really that's how it works. I see Henry's hand up.
All right, Henry, let's have you. I also wanted Adaku to also come in and share experience in the informal markets, but let's have Henry and then Adaku can go after.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I didn't even know the topic. I knew something was coming up this Saturday. I didn't look at the topic, and coincidentally, the file I shared this morning, I was just going through it. I mean, this is something I downloaded like some months back, but I just had time. I was just going through my archive, and I had to look at it. And when I joined the section, and it was more, I mean, it was aligning to the same topic. You know, I know this is for a reason. So I think when it comes to investors in the informal sector, I think we have more of transactional investors, right? Especially in Nigeria, so South Africa, especially in Nigeria, the informal sector, solving some of those problems are very complex, right? And so we need just beyond transactional investors. Um, our local investors, they currently see these things and they see potentials, right? But they are just not ready to play dirty. That's what I think, right? I've been trying to solve a problem around um, the after sales industry, right? Um, Car mechanics, spare part dealers, right? This is a very complex. If you want to solve a problem around this industry, you've got to be prepared, right? So these are not things that you just put in your money. You need time, right? So, but what I think is not like a question, but what I think is happening, or why people are not investing in this informal sector, is because we have more of transactional investors than just people who wants to change the narrative and still make return. That's just my opinion around this. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what's your definition of transactional investors?
I give you 5 naira, I want 100 naira.
Yeah, some like yes, and they also want this money quick, right? They are just not ready. You know, there's a problem, and you want to change the narrative. You want to change how things are being done, right? While you still make money,
Yeah.
you know. That's what I mean. And you see some of these investors with grants, and that's why they don't want the money back. They want, but these monies are small. If you want to change, if you want to make impacts in my domain, which is after sales, right? It is not small money for grant. You
Sorry, what's your domain?
need huge money, right? But I'm an investor after sales, vehicle car repairs and parts and spare parts,
Okay.
vehicle
Yeah.
after sales.
Okay.
So you don't need grant money, right?
Yeah.
To make it,
Yeah.
you know. So transactional investors will not want to, we don't see a lot of them in this sector. That's the problem.
Fantastic. I mean, everything you said is absolutely right. All your observations are spot on. I mean, you can call me an investor apologist because again, that's why I always say put yourself in their shoes. You have to really think of who an investor is, right? Investment is transaction. There's no other reason to invest other than transaction. It's supposed to be transactional. Because again, if you think of it, again, think of the formal ones. The formal ones literally, I can't use 7 years to gather $100K, $100 million fund to disburse. Then you now say I should not be transactional. Of somebody else's money. I very transactional. Very, very, you know. So, and then when you now think of the individual, I think Henry is talking more of the individual investors as well. If you think of the individual investors, it means I have to be an HNI. It means I've worked it for a certain amount of years. I have extra cash, right? I have the option of putting it inside treasury bills and getting 80% per annum. Straight, easy. I'm not speaking any English to anybody, right? I now say I want to take my money and put it inside a business. Of course, I want returns. I'm not just putting it because I feel like throwing away money. And it's not because I'm rich. Sometimes this money is money that is, family funds. You hope to give it to your children. You hope to use it to pay for education and everything. So I can't just be thinking about impact alone. I have to also think of the transactional part, right? However, we do have a few of them that, are also interested in making some sort of impact, changing the industry, continuing a legacy. Maybe they've been working in this specific industry before and they want to see how that grows and how that builds and be a part of that journey. So there are some of them. And again, as the founder, you just have to find the investors that fit what you're doing and fit your vision and fit all of that, right? But at the back of your mind, also as the founder, you also have to remember that it is indeed it has to be transactional because it's money. I know that it's money, it's transactional, and they have to think of it from that view. So I mean, you have to pardon them small for that very reason. But again, from your end, what you can do is just find who aligns. Um, like you said, the grants are sometimes they feel like they are small, and that's why you see a lot of businesses also go from grants to grants to grants to grant and doing so many programs and getting multiple grants, which is again a valid thing. So if you have a $100K raise that you want to do, it's for you to look for 2 grants that are worth 50K or 5 grants of 20K, and yeah, that's a valid way to raise funds and complete your round. If you complete your round with grant, that's good. So I mean, there are all multiple ways to, because remember that your investors are not going to invest big money all at once. They usually are multiple investors that come together and invest. So if you have 100K too, sometimes it will be one person is dropping 10K, one person is dropping 20K, one company drops 50K, and that's about it. So you have to give them that space, but you also have to strategically think of it that way so that you can also position yourself rightly for that. I hope that answers your question somewhat, Henry.
All right, thanks. I know you still have. I know you still have it.
My point is we just need more of, return is very important, very key, right?
Yeah.
But we just need people like we currently have that, but right, like I said, it comes with grants and you need to go through 3 grants, 4 grants,
Yeah.
And
But that's
if
the
you
game.
feel if you're filling the form with if you're filling the form with grants, right? And they tell you, have you gotten more before money before? In fact, they won't give you money, right? Because they feel that you've got let's give other people a chance to also.
I get that. Again, so it depends on
but we need more. We need more.
Yeah, it depends on the grants. Again, you have to be very intentional about the mix of grants that you're reaching out to and how you tell that story, right? If you can convincingly say, I'm trying to raise 100K and I'm using non-dilutive grants and I've raised from 3 different grants so far, 60K. I'm looking for the remaining 40K. I'm not going to throw away the application. That's, in fact, I like it. That this person knows what he's talking about, right? So we've definitely had on different programs that were giving out grants. We've had people that have had grants from other places. But again, you also can't blame us for sometimes looking twice at the people that have taken grants before, because there are startups out there that literally go from place to place just collecting money. There's one story I want to tell, but I don't know if this is a safe place. But basically, I mean, there was one time that I saw this startup that I'd seen somewhere else. And I was like, you are here again. I was looking at the application and I had to be on a milestone review so basically they had to present a budget. They had done the program. They were supposed to collect grants, right? But this program, you have to prove that you are going to get grants. They can decide to not, even though you've done the trainings and everything, they can decide to not give you a grant because your milestones or your budget is not right. So they have to present a budget of what they want to do with the money, and then we'll agree on milestones they need to use the money for pretty much, and then disburse the funds in tranches. And then there's a different milestone for each tranche. So it's a whole thing. And so this is not one of those grants that they just give you money and walk away. They will track you somewhat, at least 1 or 2 years first, before they will be satisfied that, okay, they are using our money well. So this company asked for, how much was it? I think it was supposed to be like 10K, 9K, and this company says they want to use the money to buy t-shirts for outreach. I'm like, you want to use $9,000 to buy t-shirt? Not that you want to use $9,000 to do the outreach. You want to use buy t-shirts, and on closer inspection and everything, that's when I now brought it to their attention that, I mean, this company has been going from grant to grant, has collected almost 30K before, and has not yet scaled or grown past the stage I met them in the last time I saw them, maybe like a year or two before. So flag this person, please. This person about to steal your money, and we even had them go and review their milestones and review their budget, and even the second budget that came out was not, that this person just wants to collect your money. So I mean, that's something we see often. So hence why people are careful about that. But if you can convincingly tell the story of why you're trying to raise money from multiple grants and all of that, it's fine. It's usually not a deal breaker for a lot of grant programs. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. I want Adako to just share the experience, and then you can round up your document, and then we can call it.
Yeah.
Adako, over to you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Opemipo. This has been very, very insightful, and I'm really, like, I think I shared sometime ago that one of the reasons why I'm happy to attend Umbrella Saturday is to help us compare notes, right? Because I also play in the informal sector with the adjust system, right? So there are so many people who are actually currently employed, quote and unquote, by the informal system, but most of them lack structures. Right? And so with us, it's not exactly as easy because we are dealing with money. So getting people to trust you heavily depends on that social proof that you mentioned, right? And so for us, it's been a lot. It's been quite hectic, and what we do typically is investing mostly in financial education as to why they need the digital footprint. You come to someone and say, "Oh, you're already saving." Instead of giving your money without just giving your money and our agents are marking for you, you can actually use the app, right? These are some of the that will form a structured document in the event that you need something beyond what we at Tuba Capital can provide. It takes quite a while, and sometimes it could take us as much as 6 months before you could get an existing customer with an agent to transition to use the mobile app, right? So so what I think I would also I would really want to find out, right, is this something, because I don't know if you've encountered people that in our space, right? If that's something you've also seen that they also encounter, and if you have some notes that we could share and something that can also help us in that regard.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's cool. I think everything we've been saying has definitely been in line with a lot of that. In fact, this slide that is on also shares some thoughts on that, on basically we need to redefine readiness to fit our markets. We need to redefine investability to fit our markets. What we see in other markets, what we see in Silicon Valley cannot be what we go by, cannot be what we are determining who is good enough for investment by. I think we basically just need to rethink these things as much as possible. We've also seen a lot of, I like that you mentioned the agile system. There's so many startups solving in that space. I've even lost track of them. I mix them up sometimes because a lot of them have agile in their name. So yeah, agile pay and agile card and card pay agile. So there are a bunch of them that I often mix them up, right? But yeah, that's another interesting space that is doing quite well and I've seen some startups in that space have some significant traction. Some of them haven't quite cracked it. Again, that's the challenge of informal spaces. How do you make money off an agile system, right? Because it's already a system that is meant to be based on trust. is already a system that, the concept is that I'm not paying any extra fees anyway. That's at the very core of the concept. Now you want to come inside and collect fee and be a middleman in that process, So there's a fine line of figuring that out. Another approach some of the startups also have is either to be an aggregator of different people that want to do a job, but they don't have people to do a job with. So you get them all on the platform, maybe they pay through escrow and all of that. But yeah, those are all very valid things. So again, it's just what I would really say is just us redefining readiness within the investment space of what readiness looks like for relatively informal businesses and African businesses. Too often we import Silicon Valley metrics and expect them to apply in Lagos, Nairobi, Lome. But in Africa, readiness often looks different. Some of these metrics are pretty much this. It's not just about revenue run rates and cost of capital acquisition. It also has to be like relevance, solving daily realities, right? Generally, it's also even in Silicon Valley, it's always a good rule of thumb for a startup to solve a daily problem, a problem that you come to daily, not just weekly or monthly or yearly, right? I mean, there are some startups that do yearly solutions that's working quite well, but monthly, daily is always the best. I mean, you see that in Uber, Chowdeck, the ones that people you will use every day. Those are often really good solutions. Netflix, Spotify, all of them. In Nigeria too, we've seen a lot of those type of businesses do really well. Adaptability will be another one, so adaptability on flexibility of pricing, working with existing community structures, community, adapting to the community dynamics, adapting to the different environments. Another thing about scaling in Africa is that you don't really always have homogeneous markets to scale across. So it's not something where you can take it and you take it to similar markets. No two markets are similar. In the same Nigeria, from Lagos to just Ibadan beside you is already very different, much less all the way to the north or to the east, So adaptability is another one. Is a metric that we can look at as investors pretty much to decide who's ready, who is accessible for funding. Another one would be community integration. You see a startup that is building trust where formal systems don't exist and is aggregating where there once was no aggregation, and formalizing where there once was no formalization. Those are always good things to see. Seeing the community adopt it as a whole. Stickiness, not just adopting it but using it regularly, and just having embedded trust networks within their systems. That's always a great metric to take and look at this thing. Resilience is another one, fragmented environment, dynamic context. Our politics is politicking, social context is social contexting. There's insecurity, there's no light, there's all of those things. You say startup that is weathering those storms and is adapting to those different environments. That's also a good thing. Now, all of these are qualitative metrics, right? So that's going to be another challenge within as investors. How do you measure for these qualitative metrics? Well, something I've had to do in the past is design a metric for something qualitative like this. That time it was what we were trying to look at was the validity of a founder, like what was the English we called it? It was like we're trying to solve for the genuineness of the founder. I don't know. It's very qualitative. How do get quantitative metrics to measure whether a founder is a good founder or not, right? Because around that time was when we were seeing a lot of incidences of founders, they get funding and they disappear, or they jackpot, or they use it to do big wedding, or use it to buy big motor and different funny incidences like that. So apart from all the mechanisms to avoid those things, it was also how do you capture those qualitative features? How do you preempt it and prevent it? So that would be a challenge to us that as investors to solve for those within our businesses. One, I mean, the obvious one is just from experience and having an experienced board look at these things. That's why we also have our investment committees sit, have a mix of experiences that can spot some of these nuances that you typically won't have um, um, quantitatively listed, but you can also list these things qualitatively and have them as metrics that we're looking out for in certain places or certain people, and then you can now have a representative committee, maybe rank them on relevance, adaptability, community integration, resilience. So, but it's just a matter of defining what we're actually looking for. And I think these are a good starting points to define those things. These are often better predictors of long-term investability here than all the basic pitch deck things and the CACs and the other financial metrics, really. So I hope that brings also clarity for you and Daku.
All right. I think that the one thing I would just add as a success metrics will be where's the place of our cultural nuances as a metric, right? Because what if you're building a product, if you go far north, whatever you built might not be applicable there, or if you go far south or to the east or to the west, there's just that cultural nuances that might affect it. Okay, so let's take, for instance, an adjust system. It might work in the west and in the south, right? But if an apprenticeship system might work well in the south, east than in the west, right? Or in the north, right? Also putting that nuances into the products or into the metrics would also help, just understanding that you're building a generic product. In Africa, what will work in Nigeria might not work in. And you're even talking about cultural differences now, plays, right? That play out. So I just want to add that to the list of metrics that Silicon Valley does not actually.
Very valid. Thanks for adding that. That definitely falls under the adaptability and resilience bit too. How does a product adapt to a new market? Because again, you're not going across homogeneous markets. They are very different across each other. So how does a product adjust for that market? One example that I like for adjusting to markets is the big food chains, Domino's and all of them. KFC too does it, where they localize their menu in all the different countries. So you would literally see suya pizza and jollof pizza, and then you go to Mexico and you see paella pizza and jalapeno pizza. And you go to another country, Italy, and you see a very localized menu. You see jambalaya pizza in another country. And, so many things. But pretty much that. Just localizing how a product localizes pretty much should be definitely one of the success metrics that we're looking at. So ultimately, if there's anything we take away from this session, let me just close with this call to action. For founders, we need to build with informal networks in mind, not just around them. Design for informality, then package for formality, position for formality after. Go deep before going high, right? And then for investors, look beyond formal data, validate traction and trust. Don't dismiss the informality when you see it. See it as a real frontier market, as an entry point really to the market. And then for ecosystem players and support organizations and things like that, design bridges that take founders from informal to investable. So a lot of founders can't just do that on their own. A lot of spaces and markets can do that on their own. So our work is to basically design programs, bridges, interventions, projects, anything that takes them from that, or at least factor it into our programs, which again, we see more and more of that where some programs that even within tech space that are supposed to be tech, without taking in startups that are not necessarily tech startups, but are tech enabled or tech embedded or tech adjacent. So sometimes they're not necessarily their core transactions are not happening online, they're happening offline, but they are willing to embed a lot of the methodologies and practices and tools that help formalize and make it similar to a tech business and help it scale. Ultimately, I truly believe that Africa's next wave of unicorns may very well emerge from the informal economy. We have seen some of them pretty much come out of that, and but only if we learn to see the informality not as a challenge but as a launch pad. So yeah, that's really it. Thank you so much.
Well, I don't know if there are other questions. Now questions, we take one question and then we can move. If there are no questions, I would call it a day. Any questions? That's your last slide. Right. I think it's been a very interesting topic. I know it was a lot of passion, a lot of conversation, a lot of energy from you delivering this masterpiece. And a masterclass you did as well, sharing your own personal experience, sharing how you pivoted to different industry and how you've even applied some of this knowledge to us was very, very insightful to listen. I think for me, while we were there, a product sat in my head. I called them markets, where people just come and buy and sell everything, and I just put tech behind it. It's just markets. But again, well, that's a bonus to anybody who is thinking about it. But again, I think that the informal market has the potential. And someone has said to me, Umbrella, why aren't you guys looking at the MSMEs and SMEs? Why you just focus on startup founders? And we've been trying to rethink it and think about it. And again, this masterclass that you've given us just gives some clarity to some of the questions that were blurry, for us. And I really want to thank you. It's always mind-blowing speaking to you. I remember our first encounter, and it was also a meeting, and it became, an elaborate meeting.
Yes.
So thank you very much for your time, and thanks for the work that you do in the ecosystem.
Thank you.
So no questions. We call it a day. Thank you, Opemipo, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for having me, Ayola. Always good catching up with you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.